Hey everyone, my name's Chad. This is part 2 of the step-by-step guide for CloudOffice. This deployment is specific to Oracle Cloud. You'll need to have an Oracle account already, and you should have gone through the prerequisite video where we install Windows Subsystem Linux and install the Terraform and other tools we'll use to deploy. I'm at the GitHub page, and I've got PowerShell open. Scroll up and find the OCI or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure folder, then scroll down to the Oracle specific instructions. I'm going to open Windows Subsystem Linux and change to my home directory or CD. We need to download the Oracle CLI installer. Copy that command, right click to paste, and then we run the installer. We'll be prompted, there it is, the prompt for my sudo password. That's the password we set up when we installed Windows Subsystem Linux in the last video. And I'll give this just a bit to run, I'll be back when it's done. Okay, that was fairly quick. Next, we source our bash rc, copy and paste. And then we need to copy our OCI ID from the Oracle Web Console and the tenancy ID. These are two values in Oracle Cloud that we'll need to reference when we deploy our service. Log into our account and then navigate to identity and users. I've got my Oracle Cloud account open. So identities, if you click the menu at the top left, then identity users. Find your user, there's mine. And the OCID is here. So I'll leave that open for a moment. I'm gonna duplicate this tab because we need the other value as well. And the other value is the tenancy OCID. So that's the top right under profile and then tenancy. So click profile and then tenancy. And there it is, tenancy OCID. So I'll copy that when I'm ready. Set up the OCI CLI tool by running OCI setup config. I'll paste that in. Enter a location for your config. I would suggest leaving it the default. That'll help keep things simple when we go through these steps. So I'll hit enter. And then the user ID, that was that first value, copy, paste it in. The tenancy OCID, that's the second value, copy, paste it in. It's asking for a region. If you're using the Oracle free tier, this should be the region that you chose when you set up your account. And that's what I'll do. So mine was Ashburn 1. Do we want to generate a new API signing key? Yes. I'll hit enter. And a directory for the keys to be created. I will hit enter again. The default is fine. We enter a name for the key. Again, default is fine. I'll hit enter. And a passphrase, no. I'll hit enter again. All right. The OCI tool has been set up. We need the contents of the key that was generated. Copy and paste. Copy in PowerShell, you highlight and then right click. Then we navigate to identity users. We've already got that tab open. That's the first tab here. Find your user. I've clicked mine. And then scroll down to API keys, add API key, choose, paste public key file, paste it in, hit add, and close. You're good to go there. We need to note the output of this command for the location of our file, just in case we change the location. And there it is. We need to reference this in our vars file that we're about to edit. And then we can also note the OCI root ID, just to make sure that everything was working. Let's see if we get some output. And there we go. It worked. It's a good test, and we'll need that value. All right, this is where we customize our deployment. We'll be editing a file. We need to make sure we're in the OCI directory of the CloudOffice project. This directory was created when you ran git clone in the previous video. We also need to open that same path in File Explorer, Windows File Explorer. So copy this path, open File Explorer, and then in the address bar, paste it in. I'll note though that there's a name in this, Chad. That's my Windows Subsystem Linux username. If you don't, and you'll need to replace it with yours. If you don't know what that is, type in who am I. You can see there's mine, it's Chad. So again, paste that in, replace Chad with the name of your user, hit enter. and we're going to edit a file called OCI.tfvars. I'm going to double click it. It might, if this is the first time you've opened a TFVars file, it will ask what application to open it in. Notepad is just fine. I've already done that. It didn't ask me. Okay, I've scrolled down to the variable section in the README. I've got the vars file open. Let's go through each one of these and we'll set our customizations up. Admin password. That is the password for you, the Nextcloud admin, to access Nextcloud via the web UI. The username, by the way, is ncadmin. So this should be a complex and unique password. For the tutorial, I'll make it something simple, change me 1A. The next two passwords, you don't necessarily need to remember them, but they should be unique and complex. The database and only Office password are what the Nextcloud application uses to talk to the database and only Office. So I will make those simple as well for the tutorial. By the way, I suggest making a copy of this entire file and storing it somewhere securely when we're done, just so you have a backup. Next is the SSH key. This is we created a private public key pair in the previous video, the prerequisites video. You'll need the public key value. We can get that with this command. I'll cat it. Remember, highlight and then right click to copy from PowerShell and paste it between the quotes. Next is the management assigner. This is the IP range granted web UI access and instance SSH access. If you're deploying from home and you only want to access Nextcloud from home, you want to lock it down so only your home can access the service, you could set this to your public IP address, right? So you can get that if you, let's say you go to Google and say, what is my IP? It would respond with your public IP address. And you could set that here with a /32 suffix. A /32 means a single IP address. So keep that in mind. However, if your internet service provider gives you a dynamic IP and your IP address changes every now and then, it would be very difficult to kind of keep up with that and constantly be updating the firewall rules that this will create. The other option, and what I'll do, I have a dynamic IP address, is set this to worldwide access. So we will replace this with 0.0.0.0/0. That allows me to access the service from anywhere. It also allows anybody to access the service from anywhere. However, they would need either the admin password to access Nextcloud or any username and password that I set up in Nextcloud after installation, or they would need my private SSH key, which I'm not planning on sharing with anyone. So it is still secure, but keep that in mind. You have those two options. Next, we have some Oracle-specific settings. The OCI config profile. This is the location of the config when we ran the OCI setup. And we got that value earlier, and there's mine. So I will copy that, it's the same. And it should be /home/your Windows Subsystem Linux username /.oci/config. Simple enough. The next one is the root compartment. We got that earlier as well. I will highlight, right click to copy. What else do we have? The Ubuntu image. All right, so just like we have Ubuntu running in Windows Subsystem Linux, the base operating system of our service when we deploy it in Oracle Cloud is Ubuntu. We need to get the image ID of the Ubuntu image in the region that we're deploying in. We get that via visiting this website. I'll open it up. Actually, I've already got it. Well, let's do this from scratch. Visit this website, find the 1804 minimal image, and it looks like it's the first one here. Click it, and then look for the OCID of the image in your region, right? So if you remember, I'm going to deploy in Ashburn. So I will look for US-Ashburn1, and there it is. Copy the value. Replace what's in between the quotes. Next, okay, so this is, I put it under uncommon because you don't necessarily need to change it, but it's worth noting if you're using the free tier, right, and perhaps a lot of viewers are, you should determine which AD number, and well, which region for sure, and which AD number the free tier has been assigned for your account, right? When you create an Oracle account and you're using the free tier, they assign a region and what they call availability domain to you, where you can deploy your resources. You don't get to choose whichever one you want. And it's partially based on which region you choose when you set up your account. So we can get, if you're not sure what that is, we can get those values, run the first command. There are two commands here. Run that first one. And then run this OCI limits command. And this will tell us where our free tier account can build instances. All right, so it did a query to Oracle Cloud with our account. And if you notice, it did a query for the region that we set up, right? So I chose US Ashburn 1 when we set up the OCI service. And if you notice here, there are 3 availability domains, 81, 2, and 3, but only 82 has a value not 0, right? It has a value of 2. I can create 2 free machines in availability domain 2 of the US Ashburn region. So this is super important if you're using the Oracle free tier. Kind of complex, kind of weird how they set this up, but we'll get through it. All right, so if I go back, again, my region, I already know it. When I set up my free account, I chose US Ashburn, and then the 80 number is already set for me as well, but change yours to match whatever. You should have like a 2 in one of your responses. Next is the instance shape. This is also the free tier size of the instance. This is the minimum that you could run this service on theoretically. It only has 1 gig of RAM. It's not going to be super snappy, but from my experience, it works. If you're using this just to store bulk files, you just need a place to store files in the cloud, this is perfect. It works just fine for me. If you're planning on doing things that are complex, maybe you're sharing this with a bunch of users and you need more performance, I would suggest getting a bigger virtual machine size. This would assume you're not using the free tier anymore, that you're going to pay for the service. Next is the VCN CIDR. This is super uncommon. We really don't need to worry about this too much unless you've deployed other resources in the Oracle Cloud and you don't want them to overlap. All right, I'm going to leave mine alone. Next, we've got the prefix. This is like a naming prefix assigned to various resources that created. For example, the instance name will have this value in the front of it. The buckets that we use to store our data also have this in the name. You could change it. I would make it something short. Nextcloud is probably as long as I'd let it get. You can make it even shorter. NC might be simpler. Or NC1. Maybe you're planning on deploying multiple of these. We have some very uncommon variables. The project URL, if you fork the project or you make your own version of this in GitHub, you could change this value to your instance. The web port and the only office port. So the web port is port 443 by default. That's where you'll visit Nextcloud in the web or on your phone, whatever device, and that's the HTTPS port, right? HTTPS is port 443 by default. You could certainly make it an unstandard port and change it to something different. You could set that here. And then the only office port is kind of the same thing, except you don't really need to know it. Just know that it's being used. That is how, if you open a document in Nextcloud and you edit it, and you'll see that in a little bit, that's how your browser gets to that document. It's kind of transparent to you, but it's happening in the background. And then finally, we have some Docker IP addresses. If you're planning on adding additional containers to your instance that you deploy, probably a good idea to reference or keep note of these IP addresses. These are what are assigned to the containers that we deploy. All right, that's everything. I'm going to save this and close it out. Again, maybe keep a copy of it. And then scroll back up to the instructions. We are ready to deploy. Make sure you're in, we are, but I'll make sure you're in the OCI directory, and we'll run Terraform init. This will tell Terraform to download and install any Oracle-specific code or any other code that's needed to run the CloudOffice project. It's pretty quick. And then the real magic of Terraform. Terraform will take the code included with CloudOffice, the customized vars file that we just set up, and your authentication that we set up when we installed the OCI CLI, and it will create a plan to deploy resources in the Oracle Cloud. And we can see we've got the plan, 30 things to add. If we scroll up, we can see things like a bucket policy, etc., the instance itself, firewall rules, that kind of thing. You can scroll up and look at all those. I'll type in yes, and Terraform will begin deploying resources in the Oracle Cloud. This will take a little bit. It's not instantaneous. It depends entirely on how quickly Oracle can build the resources that Terraform tells it to. And times vary, right? So one person may experience this all being done in 3 minutes. Another person, it may take 15 minutes. So be patient. It shouldn't take that long. I'll be back when it's done. There will be output at the very end. It should be in green, and we'll see like everything that's been created, everything's good, and we'll get some output on what to do next. Okay, we have our output from Terraform in green here. And if I scroll to the right section, note the output from Terraform after the apply completes. Wait for the virtual machine to become ready. Ansible will set up the services for us. This is super important. Let me go back to the front page of the project. And you'll notice here, Terraform plus Ansible automation. Terraform deploys all of the cloud resources, things like the instance itself, firewall rules, the network, the buckets for storage, encryption. And then Ansible sets up the machine for us, things like the Docker containers, configuration files, that sort of thing, packages that need to be installed. So after Terraform runs, Ansible kicks off automatically on the instance. And if I go back to where we were, we can, if you want to watch Ansible set up the virtual machine, you can SSH to the instance and then run this command. So SSH ubuntu at and then some IP Terraform told us about. I would also suggest, by the way, keeping a copy of this, right? So we've got this whole output here. You could use this as a reference later on. Also, if you lose or lose track of this output, you could always run Terraform output and get the same thing. You'll need to be in the OCI directory, CloudOffice/OCI. So I'm going to SSH to the instance. First time connecting, you have to confirm. I'll type in yes. And then in the README, we've got here tail. This will tail the file. And mine's already done. There was some time in between deploying and then checking on this. A couple things. One, it will go through automatically. So you'll, as things are happening, you'll see output in it. Let me cat the file. And you'll see there's quite a lot here. So when you tail, it will automatically scroll as things are happening. You might get a message if you deploy the service and Terraform comes back and it's done, and then you SSH to the instance almost immediately and try to tail the file. It might not exist yet. Just give it a moment. You can let tail run, and when the file appears, it will start scrolling through. And then the final thing that we're looking for is this play recap. That's when you know it's done. You'll notice here it says failed equals 0. That's what we're looking for. That means everything's okay. The other numbers might change a little bit. So that means our service is up and running. I'm going to exit out of the instance, and I'm going to run Terraform output again, because I did not write this down. And I'm going to visit the web UI. Let's check out our CloudOffice instance. Your connection isn't private. That's okay. That's because we're running self-signed HTTPS certificates. We just need to tell our browser that's okay and that we're good to proceed. I'll click continue or log into my account. That was ncadmin, and my password was the password in my vars file, change_me1a. Let me expand this out just a bit. We are in. Nextcloud is good to go. Let me go through a few features. You could customize Nextcloud as you desire. I'm going to go through a few things that are unique to CloudOffice. First, we have cloud storage. This is super important. You have the normal storage on your instance. That's the hard drive that your instance is deployed and running on. And you could certainly store files there, though you need to keep an eye on the amount of storage space that you use. It's not infinite. You could use this folder. This cloud storage is Oracle's object storage, right? So we have Terraform or CloudOffice deployed automatically for us, a bucket to store our data in CloudOffice. And this folder, if you put anything in it, is that bucket. that is infinitely scalable, so you could put as many files in here as you want. It's also significantly cheaper than hard drive space in Oracle Cloud. So this is a good place to put your largest files. And you don't have to worry about running out of space. Next, we have Talk, Nextcloud Talk. I click that. This is like a conferencing service or a chat room that's private and deployed on your Nextcloud instance. That's kind of cool. So if I hit plus and create a conversation, allow guests to join via link and password protect, add participants, I'll add myself. There's only one user so far. I'll create the conversation. And I could copy this link and share it with others. And we've got a chat room, essentially. You can also start a web conference call from it, right? So that would use my webcam. Kind of cool. I'm gonna go back to files and show the OnlyOffice integration. So I'll hit plus and create a new document. This opens the OnlyOffice application. You can see I'm in a new tab here. And we have our document editor. You also have a spreadsheet editor, etc. Check out the other features of OnlyOffice. So here we go. We've got our document editor. We can create a document. It's got things like spell check, automatic saving, collaboration. You could have multiple people working on the same document. You can share it, etc. And if I close it, and you can see down here at the bottom, or maybe you can, all changes are saved. If I close it out, we can see the document in Nextcloud. You could move it to cloud storage, for example. All right, so that is everything related to the deployment. I do want to show updates, right? So we're using Docker containers to deploy all of our services, and occasionally those will get updates. So let's show that. I'm gonna close out of all of this. Expand this out a bit. The instructions from Terraform show us how to update our services. Before I get into that, I want to show those containers. So I'll log into the instance, and sudo docker ps will give me a list of the containers. And I'll go through these real quick. We have the OnlyOffice container. That's our document editor. We have our web proxy. That's how we get secure HTTP access to the Nextcloud instance in the web UI. When it said, are you sure you want to proceed? That was because we've got a secure instance. We've got our self-signed certificate. That's being done through this web proxy. We have Nextcloud itself. That is the Nextcloud application. And then we have MariaDB, which is a clone, an open source clone of MariaDB with better licensing. It is provided, this container is provided by Linux server. So the other containers are all first party. The OnlyOffice container is from OnlyOffice. The web proxy is from Apache, and then the Nextcloud container is from Nextcloud. MariaDB is from linuxserver.io. Check them out, by the way. They have a ton of absolutely cool containers, very well respected in the community. linuxserver.io is their website. Check out what else they've got if you're interested in containerization. All right, so all of these containers are running, and occasionally they'll have updates. I would suggest maybe at a minimum a cadence of going through this process every 2 or 3 months, or if there's a big security vulnerability that has been patched, that's also important too. So I'll scroll up here, or if there's a feature update. You don't necessarily need to do it at 2 months. I would caution going too long without updates, but keep that in mind. So I've SSH to the instance. Next, we would remove the containers. This isn't going to delete the data. This is just going to delete the application code that's running. And the services will be down until we redeploy. Okay, the containers have been removed. And if I scroll up, we reapply the Ansible playbook with our custom variables. And this is through systemd, which is kind of nice. It's a core part of Linux. We can watch it start back up again if I run systemctl status and then the name of the service. We can see that it's running, or we could tail the same file, varlog CloudOffice. We can see it's going through its steps again. So eventually, the services will start back up. We'll get that play recap like we saw before. And if we run, it isn't done yet, but if we run sudo docker ps, those containers will come back. So I'm gonna tail the file. I'm gonna give it just a moment to run, and I'll be back when it's done. Okay, we have our play recap, and again, double checking, failed equals 0, everything is good there. I'm going to control C out of the tail, and if I run sudo docker ps, all of my containers are up and running again. That's about it. So we've deployed our services, we've run maintenance to refresh our Docker containers. The very last thing I want to show is destroying the project. Maybe you're done, you don't need it anymore. We can use Terraform to destroy everything. But before we do that, this is a quirk specific to Oracle Cloud. You'll need to delete all of the bucket objects before running Terraform destroy. So that cloud storage that we have, the buckets must be empty before we can destroy the buckets and anything else related to it with Terraform. We can do that with these two commands. I'll run the first one. I'll hit Y for enter. I've already copied the other. You can see some files were deleted. Those were backups. And then I'll hit enter again for objects. And there's my new doc that I created earlier. And I moved it to cloud storage. So the buckets are empty, and we can run Terraform destroy. -var file equals oci.tfvars. Just like before, it'll create a plan to destroy everything. I'll type in yes, and it will go through and start destroying. That's about it, everyone. If you have questions, concerns, you have an idea to make the project better, if you would like some assistance troubleshooting or setting up your services, reach me at Discord. There's a link in the description of this video and on the GitHub page. You could also open a GitHub discussion or a GitHub issue, that's fine too, or leave a YouTube comment. Discord is the best way to reach me. Thank you very much. Have a great day and take care.